Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2026 Annual Conference and Book Fair in Baltimore, Maryland. I am Daryl Alejandro Holness, a member of the AWP Board of Directors. I am an Afro-Latino black male in a blue suit, wearing a hat with locks. The Association of Writers and Writing Programs is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and academic programs and organizations that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. I am a member of the AWP's Board of Directors, but first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP. We invite you to become a member today. I'm a member because, like many of you, I was an undergrad or a grad student once, and a mentor told me that I should attend. And I was wandering these halls, pretty lost, until several different community members grabbed me and took me to readings and took me to panels. And this is a great place to build community. I hope that you're actively building community every day. And if you see any young writers out there wandering, looking a little lost, I hope that you can guide them to the right place. We are delighted to bring you to this event today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank MacDowell for today's event and their support of the conference, as well as the Blacklist. Our literary partners and sponsors allow AWP to present these extraordinary literary events and help us keep our conference affordable and accessible. I have just a few reminders before the event. Please respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. Please give the authors about 10 minutes after the presentation to get to the book signing table before approaching them to have your book signed. Thank you. And now it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Dee Watkins, who will introduce this fantastic event.
Can everyone hear me? You guys, all the way in the back? Are we good? Okay, there we go. Now I feel like, okay, now I hear like the little microphone echo. So we have an amazing group of people. I think you guys are gonna have a great time, and I think you're gonna learn a lot. As a writer myself, from Baltimore City, I can say that, I work alone a lot, and I spend a lot of time alone. But over the course of my career, I've been able to connect with certain organizations and places that help put me in a better position to succeed and win. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about great organizations like MacDowell and the Blacklist and why they exist and how you can utilize those tools to take everything you're doing to the next level. So I'm not going to introduce each person as an individual, as I do not have copies of their bios. I know they're very important. Some of them were dropped off like helicopters, like, like Randy came in a helicopter. I was like, it's crazy. But we're going to have fun with it. So we're going to go down the line, and everyone's going to tell you about the work that they want you to know about. And then they're going to tell you something bizarre about themselves so we can just loosen up a little bit. Like, I actually hate the spaghetti noodle. So that would be my thing. Like, if I was ever in power, like a president, I would abolish that noodle. But we'll start on this and we'll go down.
That's all right, because we got rigatoni, so we can abolish spaghetti. It's all good. I'm Randy Winston, the creative director of fiction at the Blacklist. I'm a writer, curator, and something very bizarre. I don't know if it's bizarre, but I love Le Creuset cookware, and I'll travel for it. So yeah, that's what's something about me.
I also love Le Creuset cookware. Hi, everyone. I'm Michele Norris. I'm currently the editor-in-chief of Electric Literature, and in June, I'll start as the executive director and publisher.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm a novelist. I wrote This Guy, When the Harvest Comes. I wrote quite a bit of it at MacDowell a number of years ago. And the bizarre thing about me, I have like a random birthmark that's a green dot on my arm. And up until I was 7, I told everyone that I was an alien.
Thanks, Dee. Nice to see you all here. My name is Chiwoniso Kaitano. I'm the executive director for MacDowell. MacDowell is the country's oldest artist residency, and we do all the disciplines. We've got 7 official disciplines, but writing and literature is our largest. I don't know, bizarre thing about me, everything's bizarre. I think I'm a weirdo. I don't know, I once had tea with the Queen of England at Buckingham Palace. I don't know, is that weird?
That's
That's actually pretty fire.
Okay.
Sounds pretty cool.
like, is that weird, Jason? My name is Jason Reynolds. I'm a novelist and other things. Co-owner of a literary agency, which I'm always reticent to say at these events for obvious reasons. And something strange about me is every Sunday, I bake a sweet potato pie. And I eat a little bit of it every morning throughout the week, every single Sunday. It's like nobody knows. D, one of my close friends, and he doesn't even know that that's what I do every Sunday morning. Make a sweet potato pie.
I'm offended because I never got any.
Well, you're welcome, brother.
Sorry. So this first question is for the whole panel. I want you guys to just, and I want to start on your side, Jason, since Randy was brave enough to go the last time. But I want to start on your side. I would like you guys to just give us a bit, talk about your origin stories and your careers in relation to support you did or didn't get from institutions that help develop writers.
Yeah, I mean, my origin story is a little strange just because most of this started super young. And so the first institution would be like my household. And my mother wasn't really having, like, she wasn't really with it. It was sort of like, she understood it as a thing that I wanted to do, but she didn't know how to support that when a future in letters wasn't a future that she had, right? It wasn't one that she possessed herself. And so because of that, it was difficult to see a knucklehead child like, yeah, when I get older, I ain't never gonna get no job. And I'm like that kind of kid. I'm gonna write these stories and that's gonna be it. And so it was tricky at first, but then I had friends. And so the second institution would have been the institution of friendship. And I think my friends were the ones who were like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. I got to college, and then that institution tore me down more, right? Because most of my writing felt like it was coming from instinct. I hadn't quite gotten any training yet, but I knew I loved what I was doing. And in university, instead of saying, here's how we can train you, they said that there's no place for this particular tradition, right? They questioned the tradition in which I was writing in. But even in that space, I had a roommate, and that roommate believed in me, right? And it pushed me through. And so I think for me, my whole journey, I think then the New York thing happened, then publishing happened, and you sort of, and it was always this same thing. The publishers say, there's no market for this. But my community said, of course, we all right here. And so every step of the way for me, there were traditional institutions challenging what I knew was right about me. And then there were social institutions, right? The organic institutions that we create for one another that bolstered me and pushed me forward. And I'm always going to be grateful for those. And of course, we knocked down every wall of the institutions that said nay.
Excellent.
I would say certainly it all goes back to family as well. My parents were super, super, super supportive of my love of reading when I was a kid. But when I told my parents after college that I wanted to get an MFA, my father, who had offered to pay for me to go to law school, said, well, you're an adult, but I'm not paying for that. But when I decided I wanted to write, the first thing I did really was apply to MFA programs. And I did that because I'm the kind of person where when I know I want to do something, I want to put myself in the position to learn as much about it as I can. You know, Viola Davis always talks about being a craftsperson, that she went to Juilliard so she could learn sort of formally how to do her craft. And I think very much in that way. But the real value of my time in that program is that was it was not the first place I met people who believed in me, who told me I had talent, who said that if you want this for yourself, you can achieve it. But it was the first place where I met people who had the same goals as me and wanted to do the same things and were in the trenches with me. And what I would say to people is, from that experience, from that time, that's where I met people who will not allow me to quit. If I want to put the pen down, if I want to stop doing this, my peers are as invested in me as I am, and I'm as invested in them as they are. And so they will not allow me to step away from this commitment that I've made. And so for me, having this book done, it's as much about my community as it is about my own persistence.
How's your pops feel about the MFA? Like after you got it?
Sad story. He passed away in the first semester of it, but
All right.
we had a conversation days before that happened, and I'd gotten some great feedback from one of my teachers, and he was extremely proud. He was very, very happy about that.
Nice.
It was school. I think early on, I realized I wasn't gonna get out of it what I wanted. I was like chasing validation from teachers, and it wasn't doing anything for me. One of the things that I realized pretty quickly in high school was how me and my friends rallied around each other with the newspaper, and it was like that one thing that we had full control over. And we could tell the stories we wanted. We made our own deadlines, and we had the advisor, our teacher, Miss Woods, there. But like we got to do the thing, and then we watched how our community of like peers reacted to it, and that carried over to when I went to school the second time, college the second time, because I dropped out, and that's a long story. But when I went back to school, I saw that there was a newspaper, and I'm like, man, this is that one thing that like I can use as a vehicle to serve the folks around me. And then I watched how everybody rallied around that because we realized we were in this together. And when I came to New York, I'll never forget this. I go to New York, or I'm about to go, and everyone's like, oh man, you got to start over. Because you built this whole community here, you got to start over. And I was like, that's exciting though, because I know how to do it now. And so moving to New York and meeting folks like all of y'all, like I literally remember where I met each of you throughout my time in New York, and just understanding that when you find the people that want to build with you and you can rally around, how that support just goes a long way in the work that you're doing personally, but also the work that you get to do with other folks.
I think I met you at church.
That can't be true. Just knowing what I know about you, that's not where you met.
Do you guys remember like the first residency you won or like were a part of? Do you guys like just open to the group?
Well, she gotta give her answer.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were skipping it. That's my bad.
Well, I'm the only person here who doesn't have an MFA, I think, right?
That's all right. That's not about.
Okay. I mean, and I don't consider myself.
You can hold mine too if you. I don't use it.
I mean, I don't consider myself an artist in a traditional sense. I mean, when I was interviewing for the MacDowell job, they asked, well, what's your discipline? And I said, well, I'm a writer, because that's what I had sort of, done all my life. But Dan, you and I think our origin stories sort of overlap, because I also had the father who, when I told him I had applied to Tisch for film school, he was like, I'm not paying for that. So I ended up in law school, and guess what? We've both ended up in the same position, which is arts administrators and executive directors. So the paths sort of, you take route A, I take route B, and you'll, sort of meet at some point. But you were moving on to your next question, which is talking about the residencies that folks have done, right?
Maybe the first one, like the first one you ever were accepted into or won. I don't know. I guess I figured it's like different levels, right? Or
For me, it was MacDowell. I never applied for any residencies. That's not true, actually. There's one other one before MacDowell. Just it's so funny how like time. Wow. When I was in my mid-20s, I applied for. There was a poetry residency up in Hudson, New York, run by John Ashbery, and I got into that and was the oldest person in the residency at 25. And it was a miserable experience because it was like the 2021 set, which at 25 seems very young. The 2021 set was fresh coming out of Harvard and Princeton, and they were all coming out of the tradition of Ashbery. And here I am, sort of ragtag, no degree in any of this, no MFA in any of this. And I'm like, yeah, my poems are about, they're like, we're writing odes. And I'm like, cool, we're gonna write an ode to something I actually care about, not an ode to my shoe, which is what they were doing. Like, this is an ode to like boot, ode to. And I'm like, bro, we got different traditions.
Right.
I value and respect yours, but you don't value and respect mine. And so it was a terrible experience at Husband, except for meeting John Ashbery, which actually was a very powerful experience for me. As somebody who's not an Ashbery guy, meeting him changed everything I thought about him and his work and everything else. And then after that came MacDowell 10 years later.
What was your ode to?
Something black. You know what I'm saying? Like,
An ode to regular weed.
yeah, you know what I mean? It was probably like an ode to my mama, my mama's cooking, or I don't know, something that matters to me, you know?
Your first residency?
My first residency was running MacDowell. I had never done a residency in my life, but I get to run one, which is the most wonderful thing. I think, Den, you're also, was MacDowell your first?
Yeah, I had done like a lot of workshops. So like I did the Cambilio workshop the year before, and that was amazing. And then I did like Tin House. But in terms of an actual residency, right after I finished at Sarah Lawrence, I applied to the Vermont Studio Center, which I've heard is a wonderful place, and I got in, but I think they were only going to pay for half of it, and I was like 26 and had just moved and had no money, and I was like, I can't do this, and so I didn't go. And then 7 years later, I think I applied to MacDowell and got in, and that was my first residency experience, and it was an absolute dream. I went to my employer at the time. And I said, well, I've just gotten into this thing, and they offer 2 weeks to 8 weeks. I will be taking 8 weeks, and you can feel free to either save my job for me or this is it. And they were like, well, we love you. So I got to go, but it was a dream.
I kind of wanted like the grand exit, and then you come back as a superstar. Like,
That should have been my goodbye. That should have absolutely been my goodbye.
I'm gonna answer your question, but I remember when we first met, and it might as well have been church because we was in there preaching. It was Soho clothing store. We were in a lineup together for the Pen America book lit crawl, and Yadon was hosting. Right. And I remember this because Yadon was like, "I'm making you go first." And I look at the lineup and I see Mitch Jackson, D. Watkins. I'm like, "Oh God." But it was amazing.
The story that's what we so many ways, bro. You're like, I met in the clothing store. I was like, oh, then you're like, we were in a lineup, and I was like, oh, no. And then like I was like, it was so many like
we were a lot together. And that was the best reading I ever had. My first residency was actually something I put together with some friends in 2013 in December. I convinced 3 of my friends to come with me up to the Blue Ridge Mountains in Georgia, North Georgia. And they were all skeptical of it until we got to the cabin. And it's like all black folks, and we were just like, I didn't know that we could have something like this. And we created for a week, and it was amazing. Folks cooked. I didn't cook. Even though I am a cook, I was so locked in on the book that I just let everybody else do their thing. But that was like my first experience. It was dope.
so there's a second part to that question, right? Because one thing I just want everyone in the audience to know is that like everyone has a different path. Like, however, we're gonna get there, just like you're gonna get wherever you're supposed to be, but we all have different ways of getting there. I've put out 8 books, and I've never had like a traditional residency, but I also think I operate best in chaos, right? So, but also maybe the best thing that I could ever write could be a part of me going away somewhere, getting a stipend, and then, only thinking about the project and locking in like that. So can you talk about, and this is, the question is for writers who went away and, who won or have been a part of residencies. Did it change your life, or did it change your writing? And you spoke to it a little bit, Jason, but like, has it become something that has to be a part of your process? Do you have to go somewhere and break away to create your best work? And I guess the question is kind of for the panel. Like, as a creator, do you need to be a way to put out your best product? What works for you?
I mean, can I?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
can I tee everyone off in this because I feel the stakes are quite high for me and my organization answering this question. I just got onto Threads, which I guess is the Instagram version of
you
X.
on
I just what's that?
Oh,
I've got like 3 followers. Don't get excited. But, I just got on. I just got on like a month ago, and someone commented, someone who I don't know if I follow, but they were pushed into my feed, that this person just got into a residency. It was in Greece. They really wanted to go, but they didn't have any money. And that sort of like set, my little radars off. I was like, no money. And it turned out that this residency wanted them to pay for their own flight, pay for accommodation, and pay for tuition.
What do they get?
They get to go and say they went to a residency. And I responded to this person and I was like, I don't think that's a residency. I think you're renting an Airbnb. Like the idea of a residency or a retreat or a space that you go is that you are given something that I don't think you should have to pay for. I think, what defines residencies apart from retreats and sort of the support ecosystem is that this is something that we are, this is how these organizations are choosing to support artists in this way. Do you need to go to a space to get away and clear your mind? I say yes, you do, and I can tell you why. I think the residency experience is like nothing you will get in your day-to-day life, and I can just sort of use the MacDowell experience as sort of a for example. The experience is at MacDowell is completely free. We have a kitchen with chefs that will cook 3 meals a day for you. You have your own private studio. You do not have to think about anything. You do not have to think about groceries, your children, your partner, your day job. All of that is taken away because you're in an isolated space. It's hard to get to MacDowell. We're in a rural area in New Hampshire, and you have nothing to think about except your work. We have terrible Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is terrible. You will not be out there doom scrolling. It's not possible. So you are forced to really hone in on your project, on your craft, within a very supportive community. There is a culture of care on campus. The fellow community is, the ones I've met are incredible and incredibly supportive. It is a low competition environment. And I think this is why sort of residencies like MacDowell and others like it have been able to claim some sort of success. And people, we call it Made at MacDowell. I think every, great residency can claim this. There are artists who've gone there who've been able to produce some of, their most incredible work. So that is me advocating for, if you are able to, and not everyone is able to, if you're able to take yourself away from your everyday life and find a different kind of chaos in a rural area in New Hampshire.
That was smooth.
I mean, that's what you're supposed to say, though.
I was like, I stuck the landing on that one.
I mean, look, the question is this something that you need? No. Is it something that is helpful? Yes. Like, for me, I speak for myself. Was MacDowell helpful for me? Tremendously, for all the reasons that was just stated. You don't realize how noisy life is until you go somewhere where there's no noise, where you're literally in the middle of nowhere, which for city folk also is really jarring, just so you know. Like, it's pitch, it's dark, there are animals. It was a lot of other things happening. So like,
Wait, what?
yeah. No, they're like animals, and they don't
Bears,
like
lions, and tigers.
she
and
left
bears,
all
no
this
mom.
part out of the thing. I'm like, yeah, like that's cool. There are less distractions except for the bears that are out there, right? Which is a real thing. But all jokes aside, like it really gave me enough. And for me, more than anything, aside from having space and time and no Wi-Fi and no phone signal to like just lock in, it was extraordinarily helpful. Maybe the most productive I've been in that short amount of time. But I also say what was even more valuable to me was being inspired around a table by all the other artists who are there when you're there. Because you're sitting at a table with 25 other people from all these other disciplines who don't do what you do. And you realize that art in general is all interconnected, that we actually need those conversations, right? Like, I'm around writers all the time. It's cool, but I would also love it. It can be echo chambering. And it's really nice to be around like a linguist and a painter and a filmmaker and a dancer and someone who's writing a libretto, right? And like all this stuff is happening as you're eating dinner. And that, for me, when I would go back to my room at night, would have me wound in a very different way and would motivate me in a very different way. So did I need it? I went to MacDowell after creating lots of books. Did it, but is it something that I, like, do I require it? No. But is it something that like I need for, or is helpful in ways that I could never put into it?
Which book of yours came out of MacDowell?
It hasn't come out yet.
Okay.
It's still I'm still editing the thing, but it at least helped me think. I could think, right? I mean,
Seems
books
seems
are
like you
alive,
should go
right? They
back.
change. Books are like, they're living things. You know, your ideas are living things. And I went to MacDowell with an idea. I wrote probably 85,000 words while there. And then came home and was like, this is not the book I'm supposed to make. But MacDowell gave me an opportunity to work that through and be like, oh, it's actually, this is the story. I wrote this whole story, but this is not the actual story that I'm supposed to tell in this moment.
But you led off by saying it's not the only thing, and
It's not.
you know, and with that I 100% agree with. And I think, you know, we're talking about ecosystems today, and you know, I don't mean to hog the conversation.
No,
but one more
it's
thing.
all you.
You know, the one thing I do like to say is how I approach MacDowell is part of an ecosystem. Like, I don't see us as the only game in town. It is impossible to be the only game in town. We do not have that many studios. We can't have that many people come to campus. It is so competitive. I wish it wasn't. It is. So we are not the only thing in the ecosystem. There are all other kinds of ways to sort of sustain, support all of that. Yeah. So yeah, 100% in agreement.
Yeah, there are ways in which I feel like I did need it because that was the first time that I wrote a full draft of this book. And it was the first time that I could quiet my life. And again, I was at that point, I think I was maybe 31. So I was still like a young professional living in New York City, working 3 jobs because everything was a nonprofit and having no money. And I just couldn't ever really make headway in terms of the amount of work that you have to do to like get a novel written, right? Like I was very stuck. And so, yeah, I was there for 8 weeks. I was able to concentrate. I wrote 75,000 words. What I learned though, and this was the most valuable part for me, is I was like, oh, this is actually much closer to how I want to be living my life. And so, you know, I love MacDowell. I desperately hope that I will get the chance to return. But I was like, I can't hang my artistic practice on the chances of like I'm gonna build a life constantly going to MacDowell and Yaddo, and like that's not gonna work, right? That's not gonna work. We got to get this book done. So for me, it became about like, okay, well, what worked so well for me there, and how can I try and replicate this in my daily life? And it's taken me a long time. I finally live by myself in New York, and even that is like that's like I may move at one point because it's not really quiet enough, although where I am is quiet. But the point is I was able to like live that experience and be like, okay, I was right. I need a big desk. I need to have a window. I need to have this kind of light. I need to have this. I need to have that. I need to have real quiet, like real quiet. And if I can set this up for myself, then when I'm able to go to MacDowell and get that community, which I can't get in my apartment, that's really important. But for all the rest of the time, I have to use this experience as a model to figure out how to make my daily writing life more sustainable.
I agree with this 1,000%.
She's not going to be surprised by what I'm going to say because we talked about this before. I actually haven't applied to MacDowell yet, but I know like a lot of my friends have gone to MacDowell, multidisciplinary artists. Do I need to get out of the house to create my work? Absolutely. I've been in New York for 12 years. I have finally gotten to a place where my space is so comfortable that I can't write there. Unless I'm under deadline. Like I was under deadline this week, so I was working at home like I was in Paris. But usually I need to be out the house. And what out the house looks like is different. Like if I have time, I'm out of town. If I don't have the time, I'm up at Hungarian pastry shop. And no matter where I am, there are artists always around me. Like at Hungarian, I got my seat. The waiters, the waitresses, they know that's my seat. There's a playwright behind me. There's a poet on the right. We all got our tables. We walk in and somebody announces, everyone take your positions. And I just put my headphones on and I write for 5 hours. And I do that every Saturday and Sunday. Do not stalk me. But I need that. I can't do that at home. I try, but I end up getting distracted because there's Wi-Fi, and there's cable, and there's Le Creuset, and there's like canvas on the sofa that I'm trying to finish, and the neighbors and all the other stuff. So when I have done residencies, I've really, really appreciated the community and the amount of work that I've been able to get done. It's too comfortable at the crib, man.
Now, do we need to have a conversation about discipline?
Right.
I want to read this question because I want to get it right, because it actually mentions the blacklist and MacDowell, and I think it's extremely important. In a moment in which legacy cultural institutions are facing uncertain futures, how does the blacklist and MacDowell seek to redefine the scope of what it means to support artists and artistic excellence more generally?
You want me to take that one? So the blacklist is in an interesting place because it's new, right? And it's not lost on me that we work in an industry and an ecosystem of trust. And trust to me is super, super important. When people see me, it's important to me that they understand that I'm a writer first before I show up as an employee for the blacklist. Because then everything that I'm putting into that work is because of the trust of the community that I have around me. So when I'm telling people and the blacklist is for profit. So when I tell people, do your research before you use the blacklist, I mean it. Because the last thing I want you to do is spend some money because you saw a headline and then you're upset with the results of it. I want you to educate yourself on the resources that we're providing. And that goes back to when I was at the Center for Fiction. The Center for Fiction has paid services as well. Do your research, do your homework. I'll talk to you. Here's my email. Come pull up and we can have office hours. I want writers to be educated on what it is that they're getting into, because once you start to wire your brain that way, then when you start talking about things like, I got a query, I got to go out on submission, you're educating yourself about that because that's a muscle that you understand to use. So when it comes to the blacklist and you think about discoverability and evaluations, feedback, those are things that are like the feedback itself is the bone, like it's the backbone of what we do. People think that the blacklist is all about, I'm going to get an agent. You guys have done so much on the TV film side, so I'm going to get discovered. And I always tell people, I cannot guarantee you that you're going to get an agent by using the blacklist. I cannot guarantee you you're going to get a book deal by using the blacklist. Has that happened already? Yep. But that's not guaranteed. What I can guarantee you are the free resources we have and the evaluations that you can get from industry members who have book publishing experience. So that's agents and editors. It's not people that do coverage at networks. It's not people that do coverage at studios. It is specific, and I hire those people. So I know who they are and I know how they move, and I vet all of them. It's a rigorous vetting process.
Before the rest of the panel answers, can you just, for the people in the audience who don't know, can you just give them a rundown of the blacklist and what you guys do, what you have created?
So the blacklist has been in the TV film space for over 20 years. A lot of the movies that you know and love probably came as a result of the annual blacklist, which is a survey of undeveloped screenplays that industry members vote on as like, these are the ones that never get developed. I read this, it's amazing, but my boss doesn't want it. And enough people rally around that it becomes like number 1, number 3, number 5 on the blacklist. Like Slumdog Millionaire is a prime example of that. The King's Speech is an example of that. Juno, Lars and the Real Girl, Superbad. Like these are all scripts that were on the blacklist because some executive somewhere was sleeping on it. And it doesn't mean that people didn't know that it existed. It's just FOMO. Once you create a swell effect, now everybody wants it. And so Franklin Leonard, who's the CEO and founder, did that for a while and then built a website where writers could sign up, create a free profile, and get feedback from industry members who have experience in those industries on their work. So it started with scripts. And then in 2024, I was hired to come in and build that for fiction, specifically novels. So not novellas, not short stories, but novels. And so that's what we're doing now. It's the same template where we have industry members on the site, agents and editors who are looking for unpublished manuscripts. And then authors who have published books with available TV film rights, they can list their work, which is free. And then there are like over 4,000 or 5,000 TV film industry members that are always looking for IP, and they can go on there and do a search. So it's like a database. But yeah, that's the short of it. I can talk about that for hours. You like, go ahead.
No, it's great. I just want people to know the resources that
Thank
are
you.
available. Sorry.
Oh, I don't work for the book.
No, back to the question.
What was the question?
It was about MacDowell, though.
Yeah, the question, it was about, you want me to read it again? It's like a little paragraph. Okay. All right. In a moment in which legacy cultural institutions are facing uncertain futures, how does MacDowell seek to redefine the scope of what it means to support artists and artistic excellence more generally?
She will have the better answer for this, but I don't know that they're doing anything differently than what they've always done. I think so much of supporting artists, even in really difficult times, is just about digging your heels in, digging deeper, and doing what you can to protect their ability to produce, which is what, MacDowell does so beautifully. I think, for so many institutions, I can sort of speak to this from an electric lit point of view. Like, we are having to shift our model to an extent in terms of how we're raising money in order to keep doing the work that we're doing. And it's becoming so much more community oriented. And I think that's just a part of the moment that we're in. But I really think it begins with just digging deep and showing that same persistence that artists have to have in order to get the work done. That's difficult enough. And so those of us around them who are supporting them, I think it's really just about that, just going deeper.
So I'm the person on a panel who will always answer a different question to the one that's asked, and I know that's sometimes annoying for some people, but I'm going to try and focus in on this one. So I don't think MacDowell is 125 years old. We're 120 years old, going to be 125 in a few years. We were formed in 1907. We're considered, sort of, to use a gendered phrase, the grandfather of it all, the grand dame. I do not think there is survival for artist residencies without evolution. I just don't think we can survive in how we have responded to artists and artists' needs from 2025, let's say, moving forward, if we do things the way we've always done them. I think I was hired at MacDowell as a change agent. I'm the first Black director there. I'm the 10th director. I'm the first Black director. We've had female directors before. I am not American. I am an immigrant to this country. I do not come from the residency space. The closest I've come is running an arts education NGO. I'm a human rights lawyer. That's my background. So I think there was a recognition by MacDowell that there was something shifting that was shifting beyond the residency space. It was shifting beyond the sector. And that shift needed a very specific response. And I think that's the exact moment we're in. And that's been sort of my first 3 years of running this sort of very venerable, preeminent residency, is doing an interrogation of, are we really supporting artists and writers in the way they need to be supported now that the future is here? And from what I've seen, the answer to that is we're not there yet, and I can be very frank. I think MacDowell certainly, and other residencies, I know this because I do have contact with other arts administrators, are deep in a transition mode. And by that, I mean we are grappling with questions of access. We're grappling with questions of, who gets to come here, who gets to belong in this space. Are we as important to emerging artists as we are to established artists? I talked earlier about how difficult it is to get into a residency. It's very difficult to get into MacDowell, and that is something, we struggle with. We have an open submission process. We get almost 5,000 applications a year for 275 spots, and out of those 275, only several dozens are for writers, to give you an idea of how difficult it is. So these are questions that we're really dealing with. We've got an exceptional resource that's available. You can come for 12 weeks and we will pay you to come. We will pay your travel. We will give you a very small stipend, but you get a stipend, free accommodation so you can sublet your apartment in Detroit and come to MacDowell. But it is not available to everyone. And these are sort of, the questions that we're grappling with. And we're really sort of leaning into that and having conversations with everyone, our writers first and foremost, about how we can sort of be most responsive, and we're taking it quite seriously. But yeah, I think for us the next few years is about evolution and sort of really doing forensics on the residency model and seeing if it still really works.
I think the other part to that question, and I would love if you could pick it up, Jason, is what is it like to create in this current climate, right? Because we have the conversation about, the evolution of residencies, but what is it like when politically the government is literally working against Black everything? Like, trying to create, and we see it, like I've had a conversation with a network that I won't say that said, "Oh my God, before this last election, we would have loved to make this, but we can't make this now. Let's put a pin in it."
Yeah.
Right. So what is that like? And just from your own experience and the other artists that you talk to.
I mean, it's tricky. I mean, the industry is all scared and everybody is shook. And especially in the spaces in which I work, everybody's really afraid just because they don't want to have to deal with backlash from parents. And my work exists in the school system. And so you deal with like the ebbs and flows of the industry, but also, and I always feel this way. And sometimes it makes me feel a little irresponsible or cavalier. I don't know, but makers make things, bro. Makers make things, and I feel like whatever's going on politically is going on. There's politics in America is a perennial, like the sort of pinch that we feels a little different in the moment, but it is a perennial pinch. And my work always exists in context to that pinch, but not always in response to said pinch. Like makers make. I'm making the things I want to make. I'm living in my imagination, and I sometimes resent the fact that my work always has to be attached to the political context. That doesn't mean that I don't live a political life. I don't have a choice but to live said political life. But sometimes I run to the art for megaphone, and sometimes I run to the art for mattress to rest. Like this is where I rest, right? Sometimes this is where I fight. But sometimes, bro, I go to the art to, like, sometimes the fight is that. Sometimes the fight is laughter. The fight is silliness. The fight is creativity and fairy tale and normalcy and mundanity, right? Banality of Black life is the fight, right? Sometimes. And I think, so for me, do I think about it? I think about it every day, but when I sit down at the page, I try very hard, like we were just talking about, to block out the noise, all the noise, including the noise that is impacting our lives every day, for me.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my books was banned, or two of them. I mean, you ban my book, you have to hate America. There's no other way. Like, banning my shit is crazy. Like, it's insane. Like, but here we go, right? Have you guys been feeling the crunch? Have you been feeling the crunch?
Absolutely. Like I am very fortunate enough to have relationships with studios, networks, and banks. And every conversation is, we want to do this, we just need to wait. And that's every time I think about that, I'm thinking about the impact that's going to have on the writers. Because whenever I'm designing and curating programs, I'm thinking about the writers though that will be able to benefit from it. Because these are people that have resources, so they can come in and say, "Hey, we want to do this. All you have to do is provide your work. You're not paying for anything." And you know, it's like just the fact that the name of the company is the Blacklist is enough that people go, yeah, let's wait till things cool off. And the Blacklist supports all writers from all walks of life, but that's not the way they see it. And so, in terms of resources, yeah, we're limited, but then it doesn't stop me from curating and building what I want to build. It's just that some of those partners miss out. Whereas other partners are like, nah, we're good. Like my boss's boss is good. Let's go. Let's build. So yes and no. You still like Jason said, you just got to keep going.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting. In my experience in the book world, it can be really hard to know what conversations are happening amongst the people who really have the power to make the decisions, right? Like for me as an agented writer who was published at a traditional, Big Five press, I don't know what those conversations are having. I know, the details of like my book deal and my this and my that and what is supposed to be happening, and what they're saying they're doing, but I'm not in those rooms, right? Among queer and trans writers, we have seen some shifts in terms of how our work is being received and in terms of if we're even able to sell second books and third books. That has shifted. And, we don't know exactly really what that means because no one will tell us. But we do feel a crunch, and that is very scary. However, I think a lot about Toni Morrison's quote about how in times of dread, we must write. And it's so important for us as artists and as writers to remember that we will have periods in our life where we are pushing the work out into the world and we're promoting it and we're doing all of that. But we also must preserve and have to have those times in life where we remove ourselves from being concerned about those things that we cannot control and that are concerns for the future, and concern ourselves solely with the production of our work. And that part doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And I hold really tight to that. I can control to an extent, because creativity is, I'm a little woo-woo, but I can control whether or not I get my work done. Whether or not Random House wants to publish my next book, whether or not, I can't control that. Yeah. And that's not really my concern at this moment.
You should call, other things. I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's so true that we don't know what's happening on the other side of those walls. Some of us do. And some of us know. I know a lot of it. And I get a lot of phone calls from a lot of our friends and colleagues to pick my brain about some of these questions. And we have to make sure that those networks stay open. I know this is about community institutions. Mm-hmm. There are a handful of us who do know, who know more than most of us for lots of reasons. We've been made privy to a lot of the ways these things work. And I try to keep my jack line open so that when the call comes through or somebody say, hey, so-and-so need to talk to you about whoop, and we can hop on the phone and suss it, and I can give as much as I have, right? Like, hey, this is free information that they keeping it from you. I ain't finna keep it from you because I need you to win. I need you to win, right? And I think there are a handful of us who know some of the things that we can kind of give that information. Call me. We can talk about some of that stuff.
Thank you.
Have you been feeling the crunch, the political crunch against creators and?
Yes. And I think most arts organizations are in a really difficult space because there is an expectation that you speak with an institutional voice. But if you're an arts leader, you you know, I have my own personal viewpoints and my own personal opinions, which I certainly am not allowed to express. I mean, you will find this out. You know, we are beholden to our donors and our public. And MacDowell, just because of its age, we're a big tent. We represent everybody. So it's definitely sort of trying to be transparent, authentic, truthful, and honest in this climate, but also understanding that there is a legacy that must be protected and continued. So feeling the crunch, absolutely. Every day presents something new in all kinds of ways. I am happy to have the platform I have and advocate for others who maybe don't have, you know, other organizations that maybe don't have as loud of an institutional voices as we have.
I think it's a good time to just like build on that community conversation, because I also see that like I'm in these circles and I'm hearing these conversations and I'm seeing what a lot of people go through as they try to build their writer community, right? Randy said something really interesting about getting together with a group of friends and going like to the mountains or the woods, or, you know, like out. And I'm guessing that you guys were like peers, right? Like the homies, right? I think a lot of times, if I'm a new writer, of course I want to be friends with Jason. You know what I'm saying? But like, you know, like if I'm just starting out, I'm like, yo, like, you know, because every meme on the internet said you are who you hang around. So it's like, why would I hang around with Rollo when I can hang with Jason, right? So, you know, but a lot of times, but if I'm just starting out and Jason's already in it, you know, he could be a person, you know, like a mentor, or that can give me some game, but he's not in the field with me. And I don't think we put enough emphasis on the networks that we actually have. You know, I ain't gonna hold you. Like outside of Jason and Mitch, like, you know, for the most part, like I don't even know. Like, do we know a lot of writers? I mean,
we don't really hang out with a lot of writers.
you know what I'm
We
saying?
know a lot of writers.
A lot of artists for
We
sure.
know a lot of artists.
Those are two different things.
Yeah, those are two different
Yeah.
things. We know a lot of folks who are doing a lot of things. And I think that's okay. I think what it does, look, there's lateral connection, right? Lateral movement. It's like, all right, who's with me at this particular moment? If you were young and coming up, it's like, who are the youngins around you who are also working in the spaces in which you're working? How can y'all build together? We built together. All of my peoples, we were all 20-year-olds building this thing together with a mentor or two that we could kind of call on, so forth and so on. I think
Your community is not your favorite celebrity.
no.
So like when I was going back to what Randy said, it just came back to me when he was saying that when he started out, he was trying to, you know, impress his teacher. And your teacher's kind of not your community. Your especially if they have tenure, like they don't give a shit. Like, like they care, but you know, it's somebody who you obviously want to impress because they're a professor. They probably say cool things. They probably have great stories. They know the industry a little bit, and it's cool. But at the same time, they're not in the field with you. So if you guys could just talk about how important it is to have peers, right? Other artists, other people who you know, the people who I talk about films with are other people who are trying to make films. My writer friends, you know, we talk about writer stuff. We're still trying to, you know, and these are my best conversations and the people who I look to build with versus trying to, you look for, hello, can I speak to Idris Elba? Like, what?
Bro.
What we gonna talk about? You know,
One of the dopest things that ever happened to me, like, and full disclosure, people think like, oh, you live in New York, you got money. I took out student loans to get to New York. So like, let's make sure that's clear, just so we understand where the story is going. But when I moved to New York, I didn't know any writers. I knew nobody. I got into an MFA program. That's a built-in community. But even some of them people ain't your peers. And some of them people ain't your community. And so you got to keep that in mind too. But he always get mad at me for mentioning his name, but I met Yadon Israel. I met Zakiya Harris, my homie Sincere Brooks, Alexandra Franklin. Like I met folks as I was meeting y'all. Mm-hmm. And the thing I realized, I'm like watching how y'all move, and it's like, oh, that's their crew, that's their group. And you see me, but I also understand, like, all right, but I'm gonna be growing and building with these folks. And so over the years, people are like, oh, how you know so-and-so? we used to go to school together. We went to book club together. We used to shop together. And so over time, yeah, that person becomes executive editor here, and that person becomes partner at this agency here. And so when you privy to that information, it's because that trust is there, because y'all came up together and they know all the stuff you going through. They seen you when we was eating potato chips and couldn't afford to eat at Soho House, and now we having meetings at Soho House. But that always starts somewhere. I'm still paying back the student loans. Like life is good, but I'm still paying back the student loans. But it's that community part. I think people try to skip steps, and you can't.
There you go.
You can't skip no steps. There are people I talk to every day who are at different points in their career, but we all started together, right? Me and Matt Johnson and ZZ Packer, we ended up in an Uber yesterday, and we were talking about that. And Matt's talking about all the people that he came up with, like Doug Jones and Vic Lavelle.
Their class was insane.
Right, and like that's his crew.
When I met your Don, he didn't even own a pair of loafers.
He
had one pair of butters with no shoestrings.
When I met you,
And now look at him.
Yeah.
And now he's running the company.
And look, I met Jason through your dime. I met D through your dime.
Yeah.
I met you at a book event in Brooklyn. I met you through Katie Freeman. Like Katie Freeman interviewed me for a job at Riverhead. She looked at me for 5 minutes and she said, "You're gonna hate this job. You could be a publisher." She was like, "You don't need this job. Like, don't take it." I didn't take it. But that community is really important, because then people start to hear about the trust network. And now they trust you. So like when I reached out to you through Brendan, you was almost like, "Yo, what you doing? Like, hit me."
Just call me, bro.
Just call me.
Yeah.
But I think you've raised two words that are very important, and I think they're different. There's community and there's network.
Yeah.
And I think you've talked about both. And I think building intentional community, you cannot survive as a writer in the business without that, because that will sustain your creativity when the business side is not going well, right? But then there's the network. And I think some of the folks you've talked to, I'm friendly with most of those folks, but I would consider them part of my network. And this is a supportive network. And that is also, if we're in the advice portion of the session, that is also something I would advocate. Build your community intentionally, and these are the people that will feed and sustain you, and you do the same. You're feeding it as well. It is a loaf of sourdough, it is your starter, but you're also building network. Yeah. And network is really what will propel your career. And I think in my experience with the writers I've been fortunate enough to meet, I don't think a lot of writers really understand the side of network a lot. Yeah. And the network means, yes, absolutely, coming to conferences like this. Go to every book launch you can get to. Talk to the authors afterwards. Meet as many editors as you can. Go to literary launches. Talk to as many people as you can. And these people might not be your community, as in these aren't your soul food people, but this is your network, so that when your book is making the rounds and you're connecting to agents and editors and so forth, you will have people in Simon & Schuster, you'll have someone at Electric Lit, you'll have someone at Yada and MacDowell to talk to. So you're building your network.
Wait, am I your community or your network?
You're my community.
But that community and network, it's a real Venn diagram, right? And I'll just say really quickly, for me, like I said at the beginning that those MFA friends of mine were like the very beginning of that. And I can look at my bio at this point, and almost everything on it is like some things maybe a couple steps removed from that, but it's like I knew someone who got me here, who got me here. But a lot of the later steps of that were like I wasn't getting a lot of writing done, and so I don't know why I was expecting necessarily things to happen, but it was a few years out of the MFA, and Shonda Rhimes published that book, Year of Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't even read the book. Sorry, Shonda, but you're doing all right. I didn't even read the book, but I heard the title.
On Zoom.
Right, she might be, but I heard the title. I said, "Year of Yes." I'm doing a year of yes. I said I'm going to apply, and I set myself a budget. I gave myself $500 for the year to apply to residencies and workshops and everything I could. $500, and when I spent that over the course of a year, that was it. And I got into Kimbilio, and that was the beginning of a bunch of things where I began to build network there. Angel Thorno was my instructor there, and she became a great mentor to me. Disha Filia was a student there, and we became very close friends. It's been a long and that was like 10 years ago. That was 11 years ago for me now. But the point is, like, if you have the opportunity and the time to give yourself a period of time where you just say yes to things and put yourself in some of those rooms, that's the beginning part. And I find for a lot of writers, that's the hardest step, is to be like, to have faith in themselves, to be like, I'm going to go into this space and I'm just going to meet some people. And you never know who's going to be there. I have a friend who's in my MFA class who's now a big editor also at somewhere in Random House. You just never know. So I did a year of that. And then 1 year wasn't enough. So I ended up doing like 5 years of yes.
I think
I did.
I think the other thing though is if you're on the other side of it, right? Because I think what happens is we always tell young people or younger people in writing, right? So you could be 50, but you just get going with your writing career. I think we always tell people that the advice we're giving is the advice that is given because I think it is the right advice. And also I think what it sometimes does is it absolves those of us who are on the other side of that mountain. It absolves us of actually trying to help you. And the truth is that though I am not obligated to do though none of us are obligated to do any of those things, I actually find that it is good for us, it is good for our work to engage with people who are on the come up, because the truth is that your creativity, I like to believe my blade is still sharp, but it's been 20 years and 25 books and all, right? And it's like, and at some point, you can start to sort of navel gaze, and then you meet somebody who's got a fresh idea, who's thinking about language differently. And because you're choosing to engage with somebody who might not be where you're sitting, you get to help that person and they get to help you. It never goes away. And I think so many of us are like, I already made it. You gotta figure it out. When you get here though, I'll be here for you. And it's like, really, by the time they get there, they would have passed you because you let your foot off the gas. You ain't got the chops no more. You ain't fresh like you used to be because you stopped engaging with who was fresh. And it's always the people coming after you who have great ideas. They see the world differently, right? If you got some 25-year-olds in your life, tap in. They annoying, right? But they are creative, and they got the ego, it takes. This is the part, like when you get past 30, your ego, you get humbled. Life will humble you. But when you in your 20s, they really believe they geniuses. And sometimes they are.
They are.
Sometimes they are.
Jason, you brought up something. So I'm sitting in the office at PRH talking to this editor who's been in the game for like over 40 years. And I won't say who it is, but they were like, I'm about to retire. And I'm like, I can see that, respectfully. And they were like, I'm about to retire. I've done everything, like everything. Any author that you love, they probably edited at some point. And they were just like, I don't know they said I've lost the pulse of fiction, like good fiction. Because I'm not around the young folks anymore. And I'm thinking that's where the conversation's gonna end. And they go, you're in a sweet spot because you still are at the point where you're bridging gaps between never leave that part. Because it's easy to leave it because you're like, oh, now I'm publishing books and I'm doing my own thing. And they're like, no, like stay there because that's gonna help you sustain a really valuable career.
Need it. Raven Leilani, when Lester came out, and I remember everybody feeling like all kinds of ways, right? You had like the millennials like, yo, this feels like us. This sounds like us. And then you had some of the OGs being like, man, this is like, right, feeling completely differently about that book. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And the OGs who knew better were like, hey, let me wrestle with this. Let me wrestle, right? We're having a Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis conversation here, right? There is something changing. And instead of me being afraid of it, let me wrestle. Let me call Raven. Let me see if I can talk to her a little bit and see where she at and what she's thinking and what she was thinking when she made that book. That's how you stay fresh, right? And so when it's everybody's turn, or if some of you are already up in a different space, reach back for them and reach back with some self-interest, right? In order so you can keep your footing on this thing.
So what I'm taking is you know, and have a community and build a community and respect the people you coming up with, and don't meet your heroes because they are terrible. Terrible
Not
people.
true. That's not true.
Yeah,
Some
maybe
of
some of them. We are getting into the advice portion, and I want to stay on task and highlighting the work that
The
MacDowell.
longest panel ever. How long is it?
No, it's only like 8 more minutes. It's only like 8 more
I was
minutes.
about to say, we've been here for a long time.
No, it's like 8 more minutes.
I just was like, man,
Oh, yeah.
this is free.
Wait, you guys are good, right? Everybody's good?
I just was.
You guys are good, right? Okay.
Walking up.
No.
We got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like, nobody
Oh,
else.
I see a lot of people jotting. I don't know what they're writing, but like
saying,
they're
like-
jotting.
Writing down our pearls of
They're jotting.
All right.
They're jotting. But I do want to get into this because it's really important, and people are trying to navigate this space. So if you could, have a sandwich with yourself, from whatever 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
as you were trying to navigate this space, because I imagine a lot of people who come to AWP are here to build that network, to meet other writers, to to buy the books that we're selling. While you're here, if you can, just talk about some things about the business side of it, right? The business of being a writer, that you wish you knew when you were starting out. You could talk about the business side of it, of navigating that industry and that world, and it can be anything that you wish you knew, from getting an agent to trying to agent your agent to when to fire your agent, to when to kick somebody out of the community. It's like, you're getting demoted to network, and like you're not in the community anymore. But if you can share some of these things, because I'm sure a lot of people can take away from that. So if you get your jot books and your pens ready.
All right, I'm gonna start here. Like when I get invited to talk to classes, I always ask the instructor, "Are you sure?" Because people think that this game is only about writing and craft. This is a business. It is an actual business. So if you think about any other job out in the world, doctor, whatever, people are studying the actual industry and business of that work. But for some reason, somewhere along the way, we're taught just write. And if the writing's good, somebody will find you. This is a business. So the thing that I always tell the writers that I'm mentoring is to, in addition to the work and energy that you're putting into your writing, is to study the business. There's a book called Merchants of Culture by John P. Thompson. I recommend that book to everybody because it breaks down editorial, retail, and agenting. There is nothing more important than understanding what the role of an agent is for you as a writer, what the role of an editor is for you as a writer, what the role of an editor and the relationship with the agent is. Like understanding all of that stuff so that when your time comes, when the writing's ready and it's your turn to query, you know how to talk to these people. They are betting on you. You got to know how to talk to them, not just about that one book, but the entirety of your career. Like who you are talking to, who your reader and your audience are, and I know how to get to them, or at least I have an idea of how to do it. I have a vision. People you'll be very surprised when they're how people talk about this writers, I can see that they know how to execute. Like that's great, but once you're in this conference, how many writers are in this conference? Everybody to a certain degree knows how to write, and once you get up in tears, everybody's really good at this writing. But yet you hear stories of people failing or not being able to get an agent, or the submission process. Understanding what's happening behind the scenes is very important. And reading on the industry is just as important as writing to get into it.
Yeah, and that's also where, having a network and community is really important, because we're all having these conversations and some people know more than others, Jason was saying earlier. I think for me, I tend to still be of the mindset that while you're doing the work, you want to focus on doing the work, but it doesn't mean that you don't consider the idea of what you're working on as a product and consider the side of the business, because you do want to be gathering that information while you're working so that when the time comes. But I also think especially in the social media age, there's a tendency for people to sort of like read one book or hear one conversation and be like, this is how it is. And I always tell people that the world of writing and publishing is a little bit like the Wild West. And in many ways, there are very few rules. That there are sort of some, but there are very few rules. And so if you begin to like learn or think about how like many books that you love came into existence and what their path to publication is, to the best of your ability to research that, very often there are many different ways. And so it's important to not necessarily be too rigid as to how you think something is going to come into the world, because there are just many, many ways, many methods, many opportunities. And I think timing is like a little magical, and it's difficult because you're not always in control of the timing of things. But I think if you are always putting your best foot forward with your work, if you're being a generous, thoughtful community member, then things will happen in the way and in the time they're supposed to happen. And like, just really quickly, for me, there were many, many people who pushed me to write my book faster and faster and get it done and get it done. And I took the time for me that I needed to take. And had I sold that book 5 years earlier, it would have been a completely different situation. And for me, the time taken was important. And I think you can apply that to the work, and also you can apply that to learning about the business.
I think everything you've both said, one which is get to know the business, and this is a business, 100%. I don't know if a lot of writers actually truly understand that. But also to your point, you do have to go to the quiet space and actually do the work, but keep an eye on what's happening out there. I think maybe the third thing I would add to this is a business is you are a business. You are a business. And how you show up with your editors, the admissions people at writing residencies, the Vogue magazine person who's coming to profile you. I'm just going to say this, unpopular opinion, everyone on the stage is a charismatic character, right? You are a business, and get to know who you are and what your writing persona is and cultivate that. It will make it easier for you to move in these sometimes competitive spaces.
Yeah. I mean, we work in the entertainment industry. We don't ever call it that, but that's the industry in which we work. My advice, number one, I have a few quick things that you should just keep in mind. Number one, keep a job. I think keep a job, right? If you keep a job, if you don't have to rely on writing to pay your bills, then you'll love it forever. There's like 50 of us who don't have jobs, and most of us, our relationship with the work has changed because of that, right? We don't talk about it because it's not sexy, but it's true, right? It's true. And so if you can, keep a job. Number two, take a low deal, take a short deal. Somebody offers you a number that you thought was going to be higher, well, joke's on you. Take that deal.
Amen.
Take that deal, right? And I know there's all this weird stuff like, I deserve more. Says who? Says who? Right? Take the deal. Get your school. Like, take the deal, get your foot in the door, get your book made. You have to know now whether you want to be famous or if you want to be a writer.
Boom.
Those two things are not always the same. They're rarely the same, as a matter of fact. So take the deal
Church.
that they offer you, right? Especially if the editor's good. Remember that your editor is your first collaborator. You need this person. You need to trust this person. Your agent will never, ever lose. And let me explain what, and this is important for those of you who are querying when it comes to how you know if your agent rides for you or not. Your agent doesn't lose on any deal you make. You do, publishers do, but the agent never loses. The agent's gonna get their 15% whether your book is successful or not. The agent's gonna get your 15% whether that deal is a little bit of money or a lot of bit of money. And if it's a lot of money and your book don't sell, publishers take that L, and you take an L on your career, right? The agent never takes an L, right? So the question that you have to ask your agent is, when your agent comes to you and says, hey, I've got a great idea, if you were to say to that agent, well, I don't want to do it, if the agent bats an eye, then the agent ain't for you. The agent is your employee. They work for you. You do not work for the agent. Therefore, you get to dictate what that relationship is. You get to build your business your way based on your relationship. But that person is the person that you pay. And so if that person says, I think you should do this, and you disagree, and that person feels like they have the right to push back against it because they know that they're not going to lose. But if your gut is telling you otherwise, then say you don't want to do it. And a good agent will say, no problem, we'll move on. Right? These are the things that like we never talk about. Always ask about your marketing budget. Negotiate your contracts for less advance and more marketing budget. Right? And the question isn't because you don't deserve all the money in the world from your advance. The real conversation is whether or not you will have freedom for a second book or a third book. If you want to be a lifer, act like a lifer. You don't want to come in high. You come in hot, you'll shoot yourself in the knees quick. And the industry will see to it and blame you for them not selling your book. And they'll say, well, we blew the marketing budget on your advance. What do you want us to do? Right? These are the conversations that we don't have enough. And I got a lot of information about this world. But as you're getting, and also, lastly, try your best, no matter how tempting it is, to not sell your books on spec. Does everyone know what spec is? If you don't know, what it means is it'll be so tempting for you to reach out to a publisher or an agent and say, hey, here's my book, here's the idea for the book, but the pages aren't done. If a publisher decides to buy your idea, and let's say they think it's genius and they decide to put $1 million on your head, you think you're gonna be able to write it? Do you think you'll be able to deal with the pressure of that? Write a whole book and present that as the book. Here's my whole book, and I'll give you a deal for this book. I've been in this industry 22 years, and I've written a whole lot of books, and there's only been one that I've taken on spec, and I took it on spec in 2020, and it still ain't done. Hopefully it'll be done next month. The reason why is because I feel the weight of it every time I sit there. I owe somebody money. Right? So these are the things, protect your space, protect the thing you love, always put that at the forefront, and that way the business will start to make more sense to you.
Mm-hmm. D, this is full circle. We just had church.
There you go.
Full circle. All right, I'll close out. It's time for us to go. I'll close out by saying, make sure you continue to always make sure you stay in love with craft. Make some noise for the panel. We'll be at the table buying books for the people who are really, really in love with success. Thank you. Have a good one.